My great-uncle Frank's grave. He was killed in France during World War I on July 29, 1918. It actually took 2 years to get his body back to be buried here in the East Harrisburg Cemetery with his other family members. My mom would often talk about Frank, and she gave me a newspaper clipping that she kept that was his original death notification in the 1918 Harrisburg Telegraph. The crazy thing is, I actually grew up right over here in a house, and I had no idea that side of the family, my great-grandfather's side of the family, was buried right outside, right across the cemetery gates from where my bedroom was at. We used to play in the cemetery all the time as kids, but apparently great-uncle Frank from World War I is buried right here. So in 1917, Europe had already been 3 years into World War I. The United States citizens really didn't want to get involved with it. It wasn't until Germany started sinking merchant ships. On April 6, 1917, the U.S. declared war on Germany. My great-uncle Frank would sign up for the 28th Division, which was the Pennsylvania National Guard. Uncle Frank was then sent to Camp Hancock in Augusta, Georgia, which was specifically set up to train the 28th Division Pennsylvania National Guard troops. A year later, in May of 1918, Uncle Frank would arrive in France, and within the first 5 weeks of being there, he would engage in several major battles, including the turning point of the war, Chateau Thierry. 6 miles to the west, the Marine Corps earned their name the Devil Dogs from the Germans when they defeated the Germans in the notorious Blue Woods. But as crazy as Chateau Thierry was, Uncle Frank survived that battle. The Germans were on the run between Chateau Thierry and Blue Woods, so the 28th Division then began chasing them. Uncle Frank lived at 405 Woodbine Street in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He lived there with his parents, sister Bessie, and 3 brothers, David, Clarence, and Charles. Charles is my great-grandfather. Frank enlisted in May of 1917 at 17 years old. 4 months later, in September of 1917, my great-grandfather, Charles, enlisted at the Army Recruiting Center located at 325 Market Street in Harrisburg. Charles joined the 2nd Truck Company, 23rd Engineers. Their brother Clarence would also enlist in the 879 Aero Squadron, but was seriously injured in September of 1918 during a flight accident in Montgomery, Alabama. Charles shipped off to France in January of 1918, and in April of 1918, his division was involved in the Seicheprey Defensive. Jan Hodges, writer for the National Archives, would summarize this defensive as the crucible that forged the 26th Division into a weapon. Innocent, inexperienced young men at 3 a.m. became battle-hardened veterans by 3 p.m. In those short hours, they experienced fear and reached inside themselves to perform acts of bravery. Frank would complete infantry training and sail to France in May of 1918. The German Spring Offensive had already started. This was Germany's last-ditch effort to destroy the British and French troops, but the German army did not plan on the arrival of fresh American troops. Shortly after Frank's arrival in France, his mother received a letter from Reverend Frank Cole stating that he met her son Charles while in France. By June of 1918, Frank and the 110th were moving toward the front line. At this same time, the United States Marines attacked the German stronghold in the Battle of Blue Wood. On July 17th, the Harrisburg Telegraph reported that my then 14-year-old great-grandmother was spending the summer with relatives on a farm near Loesch's Run, Perry County. Charles and Anna did know each other during this time since Charles was employed as a family driver. They would later marry in 1927.
Where'd you get married?
Hagerstown, I think.
Oh, you too? Why Hagerstown? Why not around here? Why didn't you marry around here?
Oh, it just we didn't want to.
Oh, you just wanted to marry here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then
According to my
What church
great-grandmother's
were you
photo
married
album,
at?
she had her eyes on a sailor at this time. On July 18, 1918, Frank and his 110th Infantry would engage the Germans in the first major conflict involving U.S. troops in World War I, the Battle of Chateau Thierry. The battle lasted less than a week, with a total of 1,908 American casualties and 5,328 German casualties. The day after the battle, a German officer wrote, "I know that we are finished. My thoughts oppress me. How are we to recover ourselves?" Uncle Frank survived Chateau Thierry, and the Germans were on the run. American and French troops pursued the Germans 13 miles to the east. Frank would survive another 11 days of fighting. On July 27th, a photo of Frank was taken in Corbon, France, 2 days before his death. A year later, this photograph is printed in the Harrisburg Telegraph. April 19th of 1919, Frank's mother recognized her son in the photo. On July 29th, Frank and the 110th Infantry advanced towards the German position of Bois des Grimpettes at 9:15 a.m., but retired in the face of heavy fire. At 5 p.m., the 110th made a second assault but took heavy casualties. Uncle Frank was killed during one of these two attacks. A German report summarizing the events of the 29th simply stated, "The attacks on 29 July collapsed before our front lines." A newspaper article in 1921 would include a description of Frank's death by Lieutenant William Haig, an officer of the same Company K. Lieutenant Haig stated, "It happened just beyond the Ourcq River, when Company K was storming Arampet's woods. These woods were on the crest of Hill 212, and from strongly entrenched positions here. The Boche was pouring heavy fire on the entire American advance at this position. The 110th was assigned the task of clearing the wood, and though suffering heavy casualties, the regiment performed their task, thus allowing the American advance to continue and saving other units many casualties which would otherwise have been inflicted by the Hun machine guns located on the hill." Ourcq was in Company K, which formed the first wave of the attack. This company suffered the heaviest casualties in this engagement, but fought so fiercely that the German dead outnumbered the Americans 4-1. A statement given by Louis Barnhart of Company K indicated, "I saw Frank when he died. He was hit on Hill 212. He was wounded by machine gun fire. I was in a shell hole and Ourcq made an attempt to come to me when he was hit in the chest and died without regaining consciousness." Another article in the 1919 Harrisburg Telegraph indicated, "According to an eyewitness, Frank was shot in the ankle and was placed in a shell hole by his comrades. The American forces were repulsed and were retreating when Ourcq, in the act of crawling to another shell hole where his companions lay, was shot through the chest by a machine gun." On July 30th, as a result of two attacks supported by brief but intense artillery preparations, the 28th Division succeeded in taking this hill in the afternoon after a savage hand-to-hand fight in which it was assisted by the 32nd Division. During the night of July 30th to the 31st, 32nd Division relieved the 28th Division, whose casualties had totaled more than 1,400 officers and men. By the fall of 1918, Charles be involved in the St.Mihiel offensive and the final major battle of the war, the Meuse Argonne defensive. Germany would sign an armistice on November 11, 1918. World War I would take the lives of 116,000 Americans, but this would be nothing compared to the American deaths in World War II.